Good morning, students. In the last lecture, we have discussed the normal anatomy, physiology, the blood supply, as well as the clinical presentation of patients suffering from esophageal diseases, the various esophageal disorders, the symptoms we have discussed. Now, in this interaction, we are going to discuss basically the investigations part. As in the last interaction, we mentioned the radiography, the endoscopy, the endosonography, esophageal manometry, and 24 RPH recording. In this interaction, we'll discuss all of them one by one. First of all, radiography. The contrast radiography versus endoscopy, which one is more important? Now, this contrast radiography is basically useful when we want to demonstrate any narrowing in the esophagus, or in patients presenting with dysphagia and we are suspecting some space occupying lesions inside the lumen of the esophagus, or in patients presenting with anatomical distortion of the esophagus, or when we are suspecting some motility disorder of esophagus. Now, in contrast radiography, very commonly done investigation in cases of esophageal disorders is barium swallow. Especially if suspected motility disorder is there, in these patients, we usually give a solid bolus of barium, and preferably it is recommended that we should record it so that later on we can replay in front of our seniors or between our colleagues. We can discuss the findings and subsequent replay can be done, and detailed analysis we can do. The disadvantage of this barium swallow is basically this is not very accurate in the diagnosis of gastroesophageal reflux disease unless the patient is presenting with cross reflux disease and symptoms. So, better to avoid this barium swallow study in cases of GORD. In radiography section for the esophageal disorders, the plain radiographs, yes, we can use for demonstration of foreign bodies present in the esophageal lumen. Always go for two views in cases of esophageal foreign body. Now, in radiography section, again we are having another modality, that is computerized tomographic scan, and nowadays for neoplasm of esophagus, this is an essential investigation for assessment. And the best part is it can also be used in place of a contrast swallow to demonstrate the esophageal perforation, maybe during some intervention or secondary to neoplasm of esophagus or some sudden trauma to the esophagus or rupture of esophagus. Now, after discussing the radiography investigation in esophageal disorders, the next tool is endoscopy. Now this upper GI endoscopy is routinely done for esophageal disorders and the stomach as well as the duodenum. This is very necessary for esophageal diseases, and the various indications for doing endoscopy we can go through it. Like whenever we want to view the inside of esophagus and GE junction, gastroesophageal junction, we'll opt for endoscopy. Although it is an invasive method, but very informative in esophageal disorders. To obtain a biopsy or cytology specimen, this endoscopy is required. The patient presenting with some foreign body in the esophagus, for removal of foreign bodies, endoscopy can be utilized. And in alkali or acid poisoning leading to various esophageal strictures, now patient is presenting with dysphagia and we want to dilate the strictures, esophageal strictures. In that case, endoscopy is very helpful. Now, traditionally there are two types of scope. The first one is rigid esophagoscope and the second one is flexible video endoscope. The rigid esophagoscope is almost not used nowadays. Previously it was very helpful in removal of foreign bodies, but nowadays it is almost obsolete. Now flexible video endoscope nowadays very commonly used, better known as flexible video gastroduodenoscope. In these patients, general anesthesia is usually not required and the procedures can be done mostly on outpatient basis, means an OPD procedure we can do this upper GI endoscopy on OPD basis. Now in this video gastroduodenoscope, the quality is very nice. All the details can be visualized very clearly. As a routine, remember we are going to examine the stomach and duodenum as well, along with the esophagus, and it's a routine. If a stricture is present, dilate it. Then inspection of upper gastrointestinal tract is done. Although dilatation of a stricture, the decision making depends upon the clinical circumstances and the risk of perforation in specific patient. The third investigation in management of esophageal disorders, and very important, is endosonography. We have combined the endoscope along with the ultrasound probe, so endosonography. Now this endoscopic ultrasonography, it is based on high frequency transducer and the frequency ranges from 5 to 30 megahertz. This probe is located at the tip of the endoscope. Now what are the advantages of using this endosonography? Whenever we want to see the details of layers of esophageal wall, it can provide us with detailed images. And outside the esophageal lumen and wall, if we want to visualize the details of the structures present around, mediastinal structures close to esophagus, like various lymph nodes and other anatomical structures, we can use this endosonography. Basically, this endosonography, there are two basic types. One is radial echoendoscope, Second one is linear echo endoscope. As the name suggests, you can see here echo endoscope. Echo related to the ultrasound and endoscope to visualize internally. The combination of this is echo endoscope. The first one is radial echo endoscope. It is having a rotating transducer and it creates a circular image. An endoscope is lying in the center of this echo endoscope. Now this type of the radial type of scanner, this is widely used to create diagnostic transverse sectional images, and that is basically at right angle to the long axis of esophagus. The second one is linear echo endoscope. Now this linear echo endoscope, it produces a sectoral image in the line of endoscope. The difference is the radial at the right angle of long axis of esophagus and this linear along the long axis of esophagus, that is in the line of endoscope. This type of scanner, it is widely used to biopsy the lesion. Basically the submucosal esophageal lesions or mediastinal masses such as lymph nodes. Sometimes these radial scanners without the optical components, they are used to pass through narrow strictures over a guide wire, and then we can do the further intervention. In addition to this, various specialized catheter probes are also available nowadays, and it can be passed down through the endoscope biopsy channel for various esophageal interventions. Next investigation in management of esophageal disorders is esophageal manometry. This esophageal manometry is basically, it is used to diagnose various motility disorders of the esophagus. There are two basic plans how we can measure the pressure inside the lumen. The first one is perfusion based system and second one is electronic microtransducers. The advantage of using this electronic microtransducers, that is, it is not being influenced by changes in patient's position during the conduction of test. So it is commonly used nowadays. Now what is the procedure? I am just explaining it in very simpler words. I am just going through the procedure of the esophageal manometry. In esophageal manometry, what we do, the recordings are usually made by passing a multi-lumen catheter, a catheter having many lumens, with 3 to 8 recording orifices, the openings, at different levels down the esophagus and into the stomach, so that we can measure the pressure at various levels of esophageal length. Through both the system, what we have discussed earlier, the catheter is withdrawn progressively up the esophagus and recordings are taken at intervals of 0.5 to 1 centimeter to measure the length and pressure, associated pressure of the lower esophageal sphincter. And finally, with the help of this, we can assess the motility in the body of esophagus during swallowing. Next investigation and very important, especially for the diagnostic workup of gastroesophageal reflux disease. It is 24-hour pH recording. Now, prolonged measurement of pH inside the esophageal lumen and G junction, it's now accepted as the most accurate method for diagnosis of gastroesophageal reflux disease. It is very useful in patients with atypical reflux symptoms and there is diagnostic dilemma. It is this 24-hour pH recording. These are the indications and very commonly indicated in patients with endoscopic esophagitis that is not clear on endoscopy. The patients on endoscopy, there is no clear-cut demarcation of endoscopic esophagitis, but yes, patient may be having GORD. In that case, 24-hour pH recording is very helpful. And the third category is in patients who are not responding to the medical treatment therapy. Now, how usually this 24-hour pH monitoring is done? A small pH probe is passed into distal esophagus and positioned 5 cm above the upper margin of lower esophageal sphincter as defined by manometry. We have already defined that area by doing manometry, LOS. Now this probe is connected to a miniature digital recorder. Usually a patient can wear it on the belt and patient can do all the daily activities. Whenever there is some symptoms like heartburn, patients they mark it. 24-hour recording period is usual. pH record is analyzed by an automated computer program. And remember this figure, pH less than 4. Usually this esophageal pH less than 4 at the level of pH electrode is taken as cutoff value. Total time when pH is less than 4 in a 24-hour period, it should not exceed more than 4% in a healthy adult. The patterns of reflux and correlation between symptoms and esophageal pH less than 4, it can be calculated. Most of the lab, they use a scoring system to create a numerical value. Scoring system like Johnson D. Meester. D. Meester was a professor in USA. And above this numerical value, the reflex is considered pathological. Nowadays, radiotelemetry pH probes are also available and they can easily be fixed. We can fix these pH probes through the endoscope inside the esophageal wall and there is no need of any transnasal catheter. After discussing the various important specific investigation for esophageal disorders, we'll go through the important 2 therapeutic procedures commonly used in cases of esophagus diseases. Of course, we have discussed the specific investigation. Apart from this, the investigations, the routine blood investigations we are going to do, the hemogram, the kidney function test, the liver function test, any specific blood investigation, and the various viral markers. And obviously, in coming days, maybe the COVID-19 could be added to this viral marker list. We don't know. Now just quickly discuss the therapeutic procedures. Now in therapeutic procedure, basically there are two things: dilatation of strictures and the thermal recanalization. Dilatation of strictures, it should be essentially for benign conditions only. And whenever we are dilating the strictures in malignant disease, we should be very careful not to perforate the esophagus. Earlier, this dilatation was basically a blind procedure. The blind dilatation system was there. But in 1970s, the advent of guide wire directed dilatation of esophagus is a very useful thing. And nowadays, this is a standard over a guide wire dilatation. They are basically, these dilators, they are solid dilators of increasing diameter, and to restore normal swallowing, we must remember this point. To restore normal swallowing in a case of esophageal stricture patient, at least 16 millimeter in diameter dilatation should be there. At least 16 millimeter is required, that is 1.6 centimeter dilatation. As far as the procedure of dilatation is concerned, a guide wire again is passed down the biopsy channel of an endoscope and through the stricture, preferably under vision. Remember, if the stricture is long or having a tortuous course, we can take the help of radiology, and radiological guidance is required to ensure that we are not going to perforate the esophagus and the guide wire passes easily into the stomach. Then only the dilatation of stricture should be done. After putting a guide wire, endoscope is withdrawn, and then over the guide wire, graduated dilators are passed. Sometimes we may require radiographic screening for safety. Now, there are two conditions: dilatation of reflux induced strictures, it's an easier one, and dilatation of strictures associated with malignancy. Now, strictures are, in cases of reflux induced strictures, the strictures are almost always short and at esophagogastric junction. So stomach is visible through the narrowed segment. And if we can see the stomach, we can easily put the guide wire. And after that, the procedure can be repeated over the guide wire, as already discussed. And in this case, during dilatation of reflux induced strictures, esophageal, the radiological control is rarely required. In contrast, if there is patient with distal esophageal adenocarcinomas extending into the stomach, it is very difficult to negotiate, and the tumor is often soft and friable, and the course is tortuous, the stenosed part, the stricture part. So radiological control is always required. For dilatation of strictures, nowadays balloons with inflation diameters of 25 to 40 millimeter size that is available, and sometimes it may be used for dilatation, and it is very commonly used to disrupt the non-relaxing lower esophageal sphincter in achalasia cardia. Later on we will discuss, in the coming lecture we will discuss the various disorders including this achalasia cardia. After dilatation of stricture, the second very important therapeutic procedure done over the esophagus is thermal recanalization. You need to remember just all these four things: the laser, mainly the ND-YAG laser, the bipolar diathermy, injection of absolute alcohol, and APC, that is argon beam plasma coagulation whenever there is bleeding from the esophageal junction or the strictures. Varices, esophageal varices, these modalities can be used, and all these can also be used to ablate the tissue in order to recanalize the esophagus whenever we want to make a lumen through the stricture or through the mass. So students, today we are finishing here itself. In the next lecture, we'll go through the congenital conditions of the esophagus. As you all know that most of the congenital conditions of esophagus, they develop between 3rd and 8th weeks of gestation. One of the important condition is esophageal atresia, and along with that, foreign bodies in esophagus and perforation of esophagus. We can cover these topics in the next interaction. So now today we have discussed the various investigations used in the management of esophageal disorders, along with 2 important therapeutic intervention done over the esophagus, that is dilatation of strictures and thermal recanalization. Any query, you can post your comment in the comment section. I'll try to solve those queries with a follow-up video. Thank you.